Hi, Ben Johnson here to record the fifth Excel class. Let's go ahead and start by teaching you a little bit about macros. Um, we need a spreadsheet to work on, so let's just go ahead and download one of the ones that we've used in the past. So to remember, to get to the class website, you just type in bit.ly/psdexcel, just like my browser shows here, bit.ly/psdexcel. It'll take you to the page that you see on my screen now. And let's just go ahead and use this Drills 2000 Part 1. So go ahead and download that. Save it if it prompts you to. And then eventually you need to go to the bottom of the browser and open it up. Depending on what browser you'll use, it may look slightly different, but you need to get that downloaded. Opened in Excel, not in a preview mode. So in this protected mode, you need to go ahead and enable editing. And when you're ready to work on the spreadsheet, it should look something like this. I need you to advance to the movies spreadsheet, so use this green arrow if you need to and click it until you see this movie spreadsheet. Once you see the movie spreadsheet, scroll all the way to the left, all the way to the top, and once your screen looks like mine, you're ready to go ahead and start work on a macro. If you need to pause the video, go ahead and do that and get your screen looking like mine. Alright, so what is a macro? Frequently in Excel, you'll end up doing tasks that are tedious, take a lot of time, aren't particularly fun. Sometimes you'll have to do those frequently, maybe daily or multiple times a day. Or maybe they're just very complex things that you need somebody else to do and you know they won't be able to, so you can just record a macro that will run for them. And basically it just records all the steps that you've done, and it allows you or someone else to rerun those steps on another spreadsheet or on that spreadsheet. And so in the end, it's just a big time saver, and also allows maybe others to do complicated things that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So what you want to do is go ahead and open up a spreadsheet where you'd like to record the macro, and the way you get to those macros is just under your view ribbon. And I've already added a macro here, but I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. So in this particular case, let's pretend like from your student information system or from your State Department, you frequently get websites where you have students' first and last name together, and for some reason you need to separate those out, but you don't want to have to do that manually each time you download those spreadsheets, so you can just decide to make a macro. Okay, and so go ahead and get to that macro ribbon with the view ribbon. And what you're going to want to do is, I would suggest first practice doing whatever it is that you're going to record so that you don't record a bunch of mistakes. And then once you're satisfied, then go ahead and record it. And so to record a macro, you just go to macros, click the arrow, and you record a macro here. And you need to give it a name, and so I'm just going to call it text to columns. And I've already recorded one previously, so I'm going to put the number 2 behind it, which I'd recommend numbering them because frequently you'll make mistakes, need to re-record them, and that's going to help you keep track of what macro you've is your most recent. You can give it a shortcut key. The hardest decision that you have to make is, do you want it to be saved in this workbook, or do you want it to be in your personal macro workbook? If you'd like to be able to use this macro on any spreadsheet you open up on your computer, I'd recommend go ahead and save it in your personal macro workbook. However, if you're going to send a worksheet to somebody and you want someone else to use your macro, this option won't work because they won't have access to your personal macro workbook. So in the case where you're going to send it to someone else, go ahead and save it in this workbook, and then when you send them that workbook, they'll be able to use the macro. So you just have to decide, do you want it to be available to you on any Excel spreadsheet you open? If so, save it to your personal macro workbook. If you're sending it to others, go ahead and save it in that workbook, and then you can send that workbook to others and they can use the macro. I'll just say my personal macro workbook for this example, and then I'll hit OK. At this point, although it's hard to tell, it's actually recording everything I click on and do. And the way you can confirm that is if you go to your macros, you're going to see a stop recording. So in fact, it just recorded me clicking on that macro button, and that will happen when I rerun this macro, but it won't hurt anything. It'll happen so quickly you won't even see it. Okay, so in this case I want to split first and last name, so I know I need to insert some blank columns by highlighting D and E, right click, insert. I've got the 2 blank columns. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on this column C, and I'm going to go to my data menu, and I'm going to use this text to columns, and it's delimited, so I'll just hit next, and it might be tab by default, so change that to space. It shows you the preview. Then you can hit next and then finally finish, and it's going to give me this warning sign that it's going to replace any data that's here. We entered those blank columns to prevent those problems, so I'll hit OK. By the way, the macro will prompt you any sort of warning also. Okay, and then you might as well have the macro do everything you can, so we'll just go ahead and change this to say first name, last name, and then here I'll say clean up and delete. Okay, because if you remember, we have a few last names here that need to get cleaned up. Then I would put my cursor back in the cell where I want it to finish, and then I need to stop the macro. So I can just go ahead and do view, and then I can go to macros, and I can say stop recording. Okay, and now this macro is done. In fact, if you'd like to see it run, I can hit Control Z to undo what I just did, and now I can go to my macros, and I can go to view macros. Here's my text to columns 2, and I can just go ahead and run that macro. It gives me the same warning. It does all of that work, and so you can imagine if I was doing this daily, or someone else needed to do this frequently, that would be a big time saver. Now the last step is that you might want to go ahead and add a button to your menu that will allow you to then click on that, so that you don't have to go to the menu and manually select it. So to do that, you just right click and you customize the ribbon, and you can put it on any ribbon you want. And instead of popular commands, I'll go to macros here, and that's going to show me all of the macros that I've got available. So this is the text to columns 2, and if I want to go ahead and put it on my ribbon here, I can just go ahead and hit new group, and it made this new group for me, which would benefit from a name. So I'll just rename that group, and I'll just call it my macros 2. Okay, I've already made one previously, so I'm adding a second just for the sake of this demonstration. Now that I've done that, I can go ahead and highlight this, highlight my text to columns 2, and then I can add it. And so it's now under the my macros 2, and if I'd like to, I can right click on this and rename it, and I can give it I can also go ahead and give it some sort of an icon. So if there was something that made sense here, I could go ahead and do that. So I'll just use a smiley face, and I'll just call it text to columns 2, and then I'll hit OK, and then OK. And so you can see up here on my toolbar now I have my macros 2, and then my text to columns 2. So whenever I'd want to run this again, I could just go ahead and hit this button, and it's going to rerun that macro. So each time I download from the Student Information System or from the State Department, I could just click that button, and in a few seconds it's going to do all of those steps for me. And so, as I said before, the more complicated the steps are, the procedure is, the more time saving and beneficial that macro will be. So I use macros frequently, especially in spreadsheets that I'm sharing with others when there's some complicated step that needs to be performed and I'm not sure they'll have the Excel skills to complete that. I'll just go ahead and record a macro in that spreadsheet, send them that spreadsheet, and then they don't have to know how to do that complicated step with their own spreadsheet. You can go even further by protecting the spreadsheet with a password so that there's really no way for them to mess things up. If you do send somebody a macro-enabled spreadsheet when you save this, it will tell you that it needs to be saved as a macro-enabled worksheet, so it adds an M to the end. Now when you do that, people will be warned when you email that the worksheet includes a macro, and is it safe, and they'll have to click yes. So just be aware of that. If you're sending other people a spreadsheet with a macro, that they'll have some security warnings that you'll need to explain in the email. Alright, so that's how to record a macro and use a macro in Excel.